But not only are there trends in our culture that are affecting, but there's also problems within the small church. As we look at the small church, there's a number of, I believe, significant problems that we're facing that we need to be aware of and need to address in the small church ministry. The first, in terms of the small church, is just the population change. And again, I've mentioned that we're seeing this influx in the old and the clashing with the new over worship styles and over expectations of the church. We see ethnic diversity confronting the small church. We also see a significant problem in low morale. People are discouraged. In a survey done of small church pastors, they said the number one problem that they felt that the small church was facing was low morale and discouragement. People are discouraged because as they look at their church, nothing seems to be happening, so they wonder, has God left them? Is the glory of God departed? And will God ever bless them again? And so they become discouraged. Pastors become discouraged. They become discouraged because of the financial pressures that the church faces. They become discouraged because of ministry burnout. One of the challenges in the small church, because so many people are doing so many tasks, so that there are those in the small church who are doing 3 or 4 different major ministries in the small church, and as a result, they get burned out. They get discouraged. They just want to stop and rest. But if they stop and rest, those ministries will be dropped because there's no one else to step up to the plate. And so they become discouraged about the ministry. Some small churches are facing growth pressures. They're starting to grow. They're seeing an influx of new people, but that brings in conflict. We see the pressure of being small in a large church environment. Talking to a pastor in terms of discouragement and stress in ministry, and one of the questions he says is what can we do? All of our people that come into our church, they just continue to go out the back door to the large church. And so he's discouraged. And how do we deal with that? How are we going to respond to that in ministry? We see the problem of the dominant tribal chief. We talk with some pastors and they run in, and instead of a godly tribal chief, someone who's utilizing their position of influence in a positive way for the growth and advancement of the church, there are those who hold on to power and they control the church and they manipulate the church and they desire only their agenda. So how they become the dominant tribal chief. And as a pastor tries to break loose of that influence, he finds himself in conflict with them and with the church. Significant problems that we have to face with. Or declining in plateaued membership. That we become discouraged because of that. Another problem is the turnover of leadership. That when individuals leave the church, a family moves out of the community. As a result, we lose key leaders in the church, and there's no one to take their places. So as pastors, we have to struggle with that. Because we lose a family, and in that family is represented a Sunday school teacher and a youth group leader and the board member. All in that one family, and they've left because of job opportunities, and now there's no one to fill the gap. And so how are we going to deal with that? We face the problem of ingrown leadership. One of the problems in the small church can face is the fact that the leadership, especially on the board, becomes so ingrown that new people can't enter in. Well, they can maybe teach Sunday school class or take the offering, but we won't let them with their new ideas come into leadership. As a result, the church becomes stifled in its growth and ingrown in its leadership, where new ideas are not brought to the table to think creatively and to think new ways of doing things. And so we have to deal with that. We see the traditional legalism. where the church becomes more concerned about the traditions rather than the gospel. They become more concerned about culture and their cultural expectations. And then we see the lack of training for lay leadership. One of the advantages of a large church is they, with multiple staff, can spend a great deal of time training their leadership. But as a pastor of a small church, we don't have that luxury. Every week it's a fight to get everything done, to get the sermons done, to get the Bible study done for Wednesday night, to get the Sunday evening message done, and to run off the bulletin, and to mow the lawn at the church. And so, and even if we did have time to prepare developing leadership, they don't have the time. And so how are we going to train our leaders to be effective in ministry so that our boards are doing more than just sitting down and discussing who's going to be responsible to re-roof the church, but they can actually begin to function as God intended them to function. See, these are the struggles, these are the problems that we are confronted with in the small church. So how are we going to deal with them?